As the war commenced, Napoleon faced trials from the nascent Russian army and the unforgiving grip of winter. The eruption of the war and the forced collision in October of 1806 saw French Emperor Napoleon swiftly vanquish the Prussian army in less than a month at the Battle of Jena and Arstead, ultimately occupying Berlin. Despite the Prussians' inability to resist the might of the Grand Army, King Frederick Wilhelm III remained obstinate, refusing negotiation as he sought refuge in Königsberg, convinced of imminent Russian reinforcements. Indeed, with 68,000 Russians under Benningsen stations in Grodno and a 40,000 strong force led by Buxhoveden en route, the prospect of Russian support loomed large. Aware of the necessity of decisively defeating the Russians to secure victory, Napoleon recognized the imperative of fortifying his supply line. Consequently, in early November, he dispatched the corps of Marshal Davout across the Oder River to forestall the Russians from establishing their defensive perimeter. Prussia's stronghold of Magdeburg capitulated on November 8th, paving the way for Davout's entry into Poznan the following day, inciting a fervent Polish uprising. Concurrently, the fall of Magdeburg facilitated Napoleon's reinforcements across the Oder, compelling Benningsen to halt and await reinforcements. Hindered by logistical constraints and hindered his customary rapid advance, Napoleon only reached Warsaw on December 19th. Nonetheless, he endeavored flanking maneuver by redeploying some of his forces northward, capitalizing on the dispersed disposition of the Russian troops positioned between Poltusk and Golymin, some 60 kilometers north of Warsaw. Next, the French launched an assault from the north, west, and south, albeit failing to encircle the Russian forces. Benningsen orchestrated a tactful retreat to Bialystok, electing to winter there. Despite Napoleon's aspirations to pursue the enemy, the harsh winter and logistical challenges compelled the French corps to retreat to their winter quarters. Both armies grappled the procurement of provisions, exacerbating the situation as January unfolded. Benningsen, recognizing the critical nature of circumstances, commenced a march towards Danzig, a city under Prussian control, boasting ample supplies. Simultaneously, Marshal Ney undertook a raid toward Heilsberg on January 17th, eliciting Napoleon's ire, prompting Ney's prompt recall. Meanwhile, the Russians threatened to sever Bernadotte's from the bulk of the French troops, yet the Astot's French marshal evaded their grasp, withdrawing southward from Mehrungen after a minor skirmish. Napoleon conceived a brilliant strategy in light of these developments. He directed Bernadotte and Ney to persist in their withdrawal, while Augereau, Soult, and Davout received orders to march northward. The objective was to intercept the Russian retreat and provoke a decisive engagement. Regrettably for Napoleon, incessant rains rendered the roads impassable. On January 31st, his emissary to Bernadotte fell into hands of Russian Cossacks, exposing the emperor's plans to Benningsen, who promptly retreated, although French troops nearly closed in on the Russians twice in early February. Benningsen managed to evade capture, yet further retreat became untenable, risking the loss of pivotal Königsberg. Benningsen halted at the modest town of the Prussia Eylau, known today as Bogrationovsk in Russia, seeking aid from the nearby 12,000-strong Prussian groups. Under Prestock, Napoleon, aware of the Prussian presence, instructed Ney to obstruct the rendezvous in Benningsen. but the Prussians eluded the French marshal's grasp. Eylau unfolded on February 7th and 8th, 1807. Initially, the Russians deployed approximately 66,000 troops against Napoleon's 45,000. However, the emperor anticipated the imminent arrival of Ney and Davout, each commanding 15,000 soldiers within marching distance. Despite the Russian significantly artillery advantage with 450 guns compared to Napoleon's 200, Benningsen required time to position his forces northeast of Eylau. He entrusted his rearguarding to Bagration to cover the maneuver. Although Bagration initially repelled the French advance, by midday, Augure's Imperial Guard reinforced the fray, compelling Bagration to retreat under relentless French pressure. By the main Russian army, with General Barclay shielding with withdrawal within the confines of Eylau. The town's layout posed challenge for a frontal assault, enabling Barclay to hold his ground well into the evening. However, by 10 hours, he received orders to regroup and rejoin Benningsen, aware of the incomplete deployment of French forces. Benningsen instructed a portion of his right flank to bolster reserves, inadvertently weakening his own wing. The day commenced with the thunderous roar of artillery, anticipating arrival of Davout's corps from the southwest. Napoleon tasked Soult with launching an assault on the Russian right flank to create a diversion. However, the Russians swiftly halted Soult's advance, intercepting the vanguards of the Davout's forces with their cavalry reserve. In a bid to buy time for the remaining troops to join the fray, Napoleon commanded his center and right to initiate their attack. Yet a sudden blizzard descended, shrouding the center of the French army, led by the Augureau, in a veil of white. The treacherous conditions led to limited visibility, resulting in French artillery inadvertently bombarding Augureau's position, leading to the loss of over 5,000 French soldiers in the center without making significant headway against the Russian lines, while the French right wing failed to inflict considerable damage upon the Russians' left. French right, commanded by Saint Hilaire, with the cavalry, compelling it to halt its advance. Simultaneously, his infantry passed against the French center, defended by the remnant of Augureau's corps. Nevertheless, Napoleon still retrained his formidable guard as a trump card. As the infantry units reinforced the center, halting the enemy's onslaught, the cavalry division of the guard executed a daring maneuver, launching a rear assault on the Russians. Albeit suffering substantial losses, with additional cavalry reserves at his disposal, Napoleon ordered a counteroffensive. The right flank of these units surged forward, engaging the Russian cavalry opposing Saint Hilaire's right flank, dispersing them with their ferocious charge. Murat and Saint Hilaire pressed on, and despite the infantry's resistance, their cavalry onslaught shattered every Russian unit in its path, reaching the reserves. At the arrived, launching a fierce assault on the Russians' left flank, while Soult, Augureau, Murat, and the guard maintained their positions. Davout, supported by Saint Hilaire, drove the Russians back. By 3:30, the Russians' left and left center were nearly at a 90-degree angle to the rest of their forces. However, Benningsen received a stroke of fortune as 9,000 Prussians under the L'Estoc entered the fray, bolstering the beleaguered Russian left flank. Exploiting this reinforcement, the Russians launched an assault on Davout's right flank, gradually forcing him to retreat. By 7 o'clock, Davout was compelled to withdraw and establish a defensive line between the villages of Kutzschitten and Anklappen. Around the same time, Ney's corps, tasked with halting L'Estoc, joined the battle. Ney's forces targeted the extreme right of the Russian troops, yet Benningsen deployed the remnants of his cavalry to intercept them. The battle raged on until 10 hours, at which point both sides disengaged. The toll of the battle was heavy, with both armies suffering losses exceeding 15,000 troops, with the possibility that the Napoleon forces incurred greater casualties. Despite this, at 11, Benningsen ordered a retreat, with the French forces depleted and unable to pressure the retreating enemy. Although the battlefield remained under Napoleon control, it was evident that, for the first time in his illustrious career, he had failed to secure a decisive victory. The Battle of Eylau underscored that the War of the Fourth Coalition was far from concluded.